Hello, everyone. I'm Harvey Brownstone, and today's guest is a hardworking and popular actor who's instantly recognizable from his performances in such memorable movies as Independence Day, Lethal Weapon 2, The Prestige, Kill Your Friends, You Will Meet a Tall, Dark Stranger, and The 5-Year Engagement. And who can ever forget him as the straight-laced British commentator working opposite Fred Willard in Christopher Guest's brilliant film, Best in Show. He also starred in several Broadway shows, including Present Laughter, Designed for Living, and the original production of Noise is Off. And he's appeared in dozens of TV shows, including Mad About You, The Drew Carey Show, Lost, 2.5 Men, Friends, ER, Modern Family, Castle, and so many more. He was also in the award-winning HBO series From the Earth to the Moon, and he starred in the CBS miniseries The Women of Windsor. He's also a highly successful writer and producer who's created movies and TV shows, including Too Much Sun, A Different Loyalty, The Man, Tooth Fairy, and he co-wrote and starred in the HBO series Family Tree and Mascots for Netflix. If that weren't enough, our guest is a superb and compelling raconteur who recently released a highly entertaining and refreshingly frank and candid memoir entitled Caught with My Pants Down and Other Tales from a Life in Hollywood. This insightful, candid, and often hilarious book is an absolute must-read for anyone having an interest in what really goes on in the world of show business. I'm delighted to welcome the wonderful Jim Piddock to our show. Jim, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm exhausted after that introduction. I need to go and lie down now.
Well, just wait, there's more. I must tell you, Jim, I don't think I've ever laughed out loud as much while reading any book like I did reading yours. You, sir, are an amazing storyteller, and your writing style is so conversational that I felt like you and I were just sitting down having a drink and you were talking to me. Congratulations on writing such a terrific book.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's. I was aiming for that conversational style, and people have said the same thing, that they feel like they've just spent a few hours chatting, with me. So that's nice. That's what I wanted.
What made you decide to write the book?
Well, I'd done a talk for the Screen Actors Guild about 4 or 5 years ago in a 200-seat theatre. I'd done a thing called Inside the Industry, Let's Talk About It. And I just basically told some stories and life experiences for actors, aspiring actors, and people just interested in show business. And I had a really good time. It was supposed to last about 45 minutes. I think we went an hour and a half. And I came away thinking, well, this was really fun. Maybe I'll kind of break my 10-year theatrical hiatus and do this as a one-man show. And I don't have to learn lines because I can just tell the stories and wander around the stage, just, nattering. And then I started to write it, and I realized I had a 10-hour show on my hands. And so then I thought I might turn it into a book, and then we got hit with COVID. So I was able to write something in 5 months that would have probably taken me 5 years.
Well, that's one great thing that came out of the pandemic. And before we get into the details of your book, I want to acknowledge the fact that a large percentage of your royalties from the sale of the book are going to two charities: BAFTA's U.S. Access for All program in America and the Palace for Life Foundation in England. Thank you for doing that, Jim.
You're welcome. Actually, it's 100% now, the royalties, because after the book was published, right after I was seeing stuff on the news about Ukraine, and so I decided to give the remaining percentage to Ukrainian refugees. So 100% of the book goes to charities. So there's a good reason to buy it.
That's for sure. Now, after spending 7 years in a boarding school in England, where you described yourself as the class clown, you went to London University and got a degree in English literature and language, and then you joined the drama studio in London. One of your professors told you that although you were a very good character actor, you couldn't sell versatility in a show business career. What did you think of that comment?
Well, they're right. I mean, that was probably quite good advice, conventional wisdom advice. But I have spent the last 44 years trying to prove them wrong. The whole attraction of me of getting into acting was to be able to do different parts and to be different people. I had this conversation with Chris Guest. He said, where's the fun in just playing yourself? Now, actually, I enjoy playing myself a lot more, or close to myself. But I think the original aim was to be able to do different things and get inside different people's heads and become them. So I never really wanted to be typecast as such. And that probably, worked against me as both an actor and a writer. I've never wanted to be typecast. I just want to do what feels like within my range. But again, both as an actor and a writer. And so I didn't want to be constrained by you can only play, upper class snobby Brits, or you can play working class Brits, or you can play Australians or New Zealanders or whatever. I had no desire to fit that mold. I also didn't have much desire to become an American actor per se. I just wanted to work within the range that I felt completely comfortable with, certainly in comedy. I think now I'm more comfortable doing American roles, particularly in drama. But I really did feel like the whole point of being an actor was to be able to do different things. And that's why I find it so frustrating, this kind of overwoke kind of idea that you can't play gay if you're straight, or you can't play straight if you're gay, or you can't play disabled if you're not disabled. For God's sakes, writers are now being told they can't write female characters if they're male. I have a script about a Black woman in the 30s who it's a wonderful role that I wrote, and my agent was told, is the writer Black? And they said no, and they said, we're not going to read it. Those are the sort of things that I think is nuts, and we've got to push back on. But I do think that this idea that you're only allowed to do one thing, stay in your lane, is nuts in a creative environment, in any environment, but particularly for an artist.
Now, you turned down a secure, stable job as artistic director at a theater in England to take a 3-month teaching job at Berkeley in California. You were 24 years old. You trusted your instincts, Jim. That obviously turned out to be the best decision you ever made. Have you always followed your intuition in your career choices?
Mostly, yes, absolutely. I think if you make decisions for the wrong reasons in any part of your life, whether it be personal or professional, you'll pay a price for that. I wasn't so much teaching I was teaching a bit, but mostly I was just directing, which again, I hadn't done much of, and I'd done no teaching at all. But I just wanted to get away, and I thought it was an exciting opportunity that I didn't know where it was going to lead.
Well, when you first got to America, you described it as much less rigid and predictable than Britain. It was a more fluid and vigorous country, socially, economically, and creatively. Do you still feel that way about America?
To a degree, yes, I do. I think America's at a very difficult place in its history right now, more so than when I arrived. It was more the newness. When you're out of your comfort zone and you're in a new place, you really do appreciate certain different things, and you get. It's true. The old cliche, travel broadens the mind, is absolutely right. And I felt it was for me at my stage in my life. I was 24. It just opened my eyes to a lot of different things. And as I say, 3 months became 44 years.
Now, you had a lot of success on Broadway, as I mentioned in my introduction. But in 1985, at the age of 28, and without a job, you moved to Los Angeles because you wanted to be a film and TV actor. Why didn't you want to stay on the stage?
Yeah, again, that was kind of getting out of one's comfort zone. I'd had a wonderful 3 years in New York. I'd done 4 plays on Broadway and pretty much worked nonstop. I was a bit burnt out, and I just had a gut feeling this wasn't what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I enjoyed it. I loved the theatre, and up until that point, I'd done nothing but theatre in the first, whatever it was, 6-7 years of my career. But I wanted to do film and TV, and I wanted to challenge myself. And so I took I suppose you'd call it the harder option, rather than staying in New York and just riding that wave. I almost started again by moving to LA. And for me, that was the right choice. I ended up doing what I wanted to be doing, and had different experiences because of that.
You played Prince Charles in the TV miniseries The Women of Windsor, and you made him a rather sympathetic character. It's quite a contrast to the way he's been portrayed in The Crown. When you're playing a real person, is the preparation more difficult or intimidating than preparing to play a fictitious character?
Well, it's more rigid. Obviously, when you're playing a fictitious character, you invent the rules. You go, okay, well, I've just decided he's doing this. The script says otherwise. He's this, and this. You make your own choices. So a real person, you've got certain guidelines you have to stick to. That said, the level of interpretation is enormous. So you could play Winston Churchill, for example, as a very charismatic, wonderful, heroic guy, or you could play him as a sort of somewhat right-wing, dictatorial, insensitive person. So, I mean, history kind of lets you rewrite, I suppose, to a degree, but this is a living, breathing person. So it's a little hard for history to kind of interpret. And Prince Charles, I did my research and I knew enough, my gut feeling about who he was and what he was. And I always felt he got a bit of a raw deal in terms of how he was perceived. So I really attached that kind of approach to it, that I wanted to show the human side of Prince Charles, and maybe I tilted it too far. I don't know, but that's, for me, that was the way I wanted it to work. And I think I also portrayed the sort of slightly emotionally restricted side of him.
Would you play him the same way now?
Yes, I think I would, actually. Absolutely. I think that he's a guy who's not afraid to speak out of the things he believes in. And if you have things that you don't like about what he does or his behavior, or I think it's mostly due to the fact that he was born into this situation that puts you in a straitjacket. And the same for all the royals. So I think given the circumstances of the fishbowl he's in, I think he's done extremely well. And given that he's not naturally an extrovert, I felt that was the right approach. And then, I think I say in the book, though, there was a woman on the set who was a technical advisor who'd worked for Charles and Diana. And she said that, I had absolutely nailed that side of him, and that he was far more charming and kind than people gave him credit for.
Well, now, Jim, I have to ask you about Best in Show. Your scenes with Fred Willard are widely considered to be a masterclass in improvisational comedy. I was amazed to read that you shot those scenes in an empty stadium and you were actually commentating on dog show footage that had already been shot. That's just astonishing that you made it all seem so real.
Yeah, that's right. It was already shot, the dog show. And we had one day to shoot it in because I had to fly back to London. I was working on another show. And so we kind of boxed into a corner. So Fred and I did everything. I mean, we were in the second half of that movie, most of the second half of that movie. So we shot all that footage in one day, which is extraordinary. It's probably the most amount of footage that's been shot in a single day that's ended up on film. You've got to give credit where credit's due. I mean, the real genius behind that partnership was Fred. I mean, I played the straight man and I did that very capably, but what made it, the plane take off in such an extraordinary way was Fred's genius, comic genius, and I harnessed that and I think enhanced it. I'm not going to underplay my role in that, but let's make no mistake, he was driving that car.
Well, I know you've been asked a million times how you managed to keep a straight face, but there are a couple of moments when I looked, to me, like you were actually trying hard not to laugh. Am I right?
Totally, and you can see, but I mean, it worked because the character was finding Fred amusing at the beginning, and then he found him confusing, and then he was downright annoyed by him. But all the time, I had to hide that because we're on air. We're commentating on the TV show, so it worked. Me just restraining myself as an actor from laughing because it seemed like the character was doing that, and that felt like it worked, and it was very real. And then, I had to figure out how to progress from that because I felt that the character needed an arc, my character, which was, as I say, to be mildly amused, then confused, and then finally I stick the knife in his back at the end by saying, yes, I remember you said that last year, and just sort of completely castrate him with one line.
I find it so ironic, Jim, that even though Best in Show took only 3 days out of your life to do, it's one of the roles you're probably most identified with and remembered for.
Isn't it crazy? Yeah, I mean, I talk about that because that other show I was doing in England was a show I'd written and produced, a sitcom, did 7 episodes. That probably took a year of my life. And that is now totally forgotten. Nobody remembers that at all. And it had three wonderful actors. It had Mark Addy, Alex Jennings, Lee Majors, Nigel Lindsay, another fine actor. It was a great cast. And the show wasn't terrible at all. It was well received and it was fine, but no one remembers it. And yet Best in Show, which took me a day to shoot and I had 2 travel days to that, back to London to Vancouver round trip. And that's 22 years later, we're still talking about it. It's insane. I mean, that's the business though, that's this business. But as I say, that was a real unusual situation. I've never shot one day of material and ended up with much more than one short scene in it, or, you know, the most 2 scenes if you're lucky. But to get into the bulk of 45 minutes of a movie, the second half of that movie, was pretty rare. And as I say, almost certainly a record.
Well, it's one of my all-time favorites. In 2007, you played Harrington in Who's Your Caddy, and you said that you didn't love the film. So were you surprised to learn that President Clinton said it was his favorite comedy movie?
I did. When I say I love it, it was a struggle to make, as I go into great detail, but an amusing struggle to make. It's not a great film by any stretch of the imagination, although I have, and I think I watched it again recently and I laughed out loud a few times. It's crazy. It's absolutely insane. But it is one of the, you know, I think on Rotten Tomatoes or Tomatoes, as you might say, it was, you know, the worst film of the year. It's shocking in some ways. It's appalling. But yeah, President Clinton said it's his favorite comedy. So that says probably more about the former president than it does the film. But listen, as I say, I watched it cold after many years, and I laughed out loud several times.
So did I. You had the opportunity to appear on Broadway in Spamalot, but you turned it down because you said the timing was bad. Would you ever consider doing a Broadway show now at this time in your life?
Yeah, sure. Not a long run. I have no interest in doing a long run again. I've done that and I get very bored very easily, and I want to move on once I feel like I've done something. So if I did a show in, I think 2012, a week or 2 weeks, I can't remember, on Broadway. And that was great. It was just a limited run. But yeah, I mean, if the right thing came along, I'd never say never. Yeah.
You co-wrote and starred in Family Tree, a wonderful TV series on HBO. You wrote that contrary to popular belief, writing a show that's improvised is much harder and takes much longer than writing a show that's scripted. Why is that?
Well, thank you for saying it's a lovely show. I'm very proud of that show, as is Chris Guest. The reason it takes so long is because you're laying out a map for the actors that can't be diverted from. I mean, a script I can write, usually a screenplay I can write in 6 to 8 weeks. We took 6 months to write those episodes. Now, admittedly, there are 8 episodes, so that's more than a film length. But you can't leave any room for error. So you have to work out every scene in great detail and then have suggestions of dialogue and jokes, suggestions of jokes, but let the actors do that in their own words. So it has that natural documentary feel. But when you do that, I mean, people that have done improvised films often fall flat on their face because they don't have that really tight, detailed structure. And if nothing else, Chris Guest's films are loaded with detail. And that's what makes them stand the test of time and what makes them so good. A lot of improvised films, people think you just have the actors show up and let's roll. If you do that, you're going to end up with a disaster because the other actors don't know what the ones before have done, and you've got a story that makes no sense. So you have to really work it out and work the characters out. We write very detailed character biographies for each character, where they went to school, what their favorite meal is, what their childhood pet's name was, and stuff like that, which is way more than you need, but it gives the actor something to really hold on to and then to supplement themselves. So it just does. I mean, and part of the reason is that Chris likes to work very slowly. I'm a sprinter, so I'm always bang, 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 bang. And it was good for me to slow down and work at that pace with him. But yes, it does take longer. It's harder to write an improvised movie than a scripted one, which sounds absurd, but it's true.
Well, Family Tree was a hugely popular, highly acclaimed show. Everyone, including me, was shocked when it ended after only 1 season. Why didn't the show keep going?
Well, it was a financial decision more than anything else. I mean, HBO and BBC both wanted to do another season. Chris and I definitely wanted to do another season. All the actors wanted to do another season. But the company that owned it, NBC Universal International, they didn't want to deficit finance the show anymore. And it was quite an expensive show to do. I think and I don't mind speaking honestly about this because the truth is the truth, and I'm not burning any bridges, probably. I felt that the smart thing to do would be to come to us and say, look, can we do this show a second season at 25% less budget or whatever less, and we'd have found a way, because Chris and I, we work to budgets, we know how to do that. So that was the disappointing thing, that they just went, oh, we don't want to do this. And so maybe HBO and BBC didn't push hard enough, but for whatever reason, business reasons, it didn't get a second season. And a lot of people disappointed because it built up a fanatical kind of audience. And we were getting numbers that were equivalent to Girls. And so it didn't make a lot of sense. I don't think it was hip enough for HBO at that time. I think it was, what it reminds me of now? It reminds me of Ted Lasso. I think we were slightly ahead of our time, and it was a gentle, good-natured, far from mean-spirited comedy, which was not the vogue at that time. And I think we were slightly ahead of our time in that respect, because I think comedy is changing now, thanks to Ted Lasso and shows like that, which are about the best part of human nature, as opposed to the worst, and people trying their best, however flawed they are. You know that they're well-intentioned. And that's a big difference. And I think that was not really in the remit of HBO at that time. They wanted edgy, and they wanted hard, and they wanted stuff like that. I think it's changed now. I think, as I say, I think the door was open by Ted Lasso, which is a wonderful show. But that's how I would compare it, in that vein.
Jim, I want to read you something you wrote in the book. You said, "One of the things I've always been acutely aware of is that show business is a composition of show and business. As an actor, that means knowing realistically what your fair market value is as a performer. And as a writer, it means knowing realistically what the fair market value is of something you've written." So, Jim, how do you go about determining your fair market value at any given time?
Well, you have to be realistic. You have to know where you stand in the chain of things, and you have to not kind of undersell yourself either. I had this conversation with another writer producer yesterday who was saying he always undersold himself, and I said I don't think I do. I think, and the same when I've owned 3 houses in LA, and each time I've sold the 2, I've priced them exactly where they should be priced, and you end up getting more because of that. Because there's a bidding situation. So I feel like it's stupid to reach for the stars and say, I want, $1 million an episode, when you know that you're probably worth $10,000 an episode or whatever, I'm just plucking those numbers out of the air. So you've got to be realistic, and you've also got to go by what your previous, quotes are and what you've been paid before. So, yeah, I cite examples in the book of when I felt I was, being offered something way below market value, and stood firm and said, I'm prepared not to do this. And the same with acting now. If someone says, do this and we're only going to pay you this, I go, well, find someone else. That's fine. I'm not insulted, so don't you be insulted. And I think that's kind of a good thing for your own self-esteem, and just to as a business policy. As I say, I think, if someone offers me way more than I think I'm worth, I'm not going to argue in the opposite direction. I just grab it and, bite their hand off and take their money and run. But I think, it's very important for everybody, who's independent contractor, to know what your value is and not be, unrealistic about it.
You do realize that that's a very unique quality you have in this industry, that you're very grounded, you're humble, you're able to be objective about yourself. I hope you do appreciate that is not very common.
Well, thank you. I don't know if it is or not. It's odd for a creative person to have an analytical brain like that. But I do have 2 sides, or more than that, because I'm a producer as well. But I have that overview, which would probably make me a decent director in some ways too. But I think that's just who I am, and I'm very practical. So that's another side, you know, and I'm not a kind of chaotic creative person. I'm quite practical and organized, and I do believe that it's 2% inspiration and 98% perspiration. I really believe that old cliche.
Now, one of the most interesting and thought-provoking chapters in your book is about the astonishing impact of social media in our lives. I'm not going to ask you about your Facebook post that triggered that chapter because I want people to get your book and read it for themselves. But I do want to ask you about something you wrote in that chapter. You said that Facebook is the Chernobyl of social media and Twitter is the Gulag. Why do you say that?
Well, they both become quite dangerous now. You know, I mean, I think people have to be very careful. I think when they first started, they were great, you know, means to reconnect with people and to make the world more interconnected. And then it got abused, as everything does. You know, any great invention becomes abused at some point. So I feel like the two instances I talk about are comedy ones, comic instances but it was a foretelling of where things could go. You know, one was the situation got way out of control, where you know, a lie that was, or a joke that was said went halfway around the world before I could correct it and say it was a joke, not serious, which was kind of amusing. And the other one, well, just to give a teaser, I say, you know, it becomes a de facto quiz. Here are 10 A-listers I've worked with, 9 I loved, and 1 was a 4 asterisks word. And then I explain why I love these 9 A-list actors and why the 1 asterisk were, you know, the 4 asterisk person was that person. And what was fun about that was when I did it, and I actually gave the book to this person I was met, this other writer producer yesterday, and I was telling him about that chapter, and he said, "Oh, let me guess." And he said, "Let me show me the page of the 10 stars," and he said, "I'm going to take a guess." And it took him 10 guesses. He got it wrong every single time. He went through the entire list until he was left with 1. And so that's the fun of part of that, is that there are a lot of people it could have been. And I actually rehabilitate their reputations by saying, no, they may have a reputation for being difficult or a diva or whatever, but I really had a good time with them. So there, take that and run with it. And then when I do get to the person who was the 4 asterisks, and you can choose your own word for that, I let them have it with both barrels, because I felt it was disgraceful behavior. And I'm too old and too rich and too tired to give a shit about people what think anymore. And so I call out 3 or 4 people in the book, and 2 of them are major stars and or very well-known people. And 1 is dead, so the 3rd one is dead, so they can't sue me. But I think that's important. I think it's important, and people tiptoe around that. And a lot of people inside the business really appreciate that I name names, and they've said that's really not courageous, because there's nothing courageous about it. Courageous is, you know, protecting your country against a foreign invasion. But it was certainly took a little bit of balls to do that.
Well, I think you didn't just name names, you cited facts, and you made it understandable why, from your perspective, these people were difficult to work with or unprofessional. And I don't want to name them because I want people to get the book, but I applaud you for telling it like it is.
Thank you. I mean, I think it's important to do that in any walk of life. Don't let people get away with stuff. Bullies do not get away with it. They can't get away with it, politically, socially, and professionally.
Now, Jim, I want to take a moment to mention that Bill Paxton was a good friend of yours. You paid tribute to him in your book, and you gave us a glimpse of what he was really like as a person. And I just want to thank you for doing that. I was a huge fan of his.
Yeah. I talk about Bill because he was one of those unlikely friendships that you have in your life. You know, we all have them. We have friends that we go, I don't know how we became friends, and it's no one would put that on paper. I mean, Bill and I were almost total opposites. He was very kind of gregarious, extrovert Texan, and I'm a sort of fairly introverted, believe it or not, British, you know, guy with emotionally repressed. So it was an interesting. We kind of became friends because he wanted to direct something I wrote, and we weren't super close, but we'd meet every so often and chat, and we always just got a kick out of each other. And then finally, after dancing around projects for years, both as producers and writers, and actor, whatever. He finally was doing the show Training Day for CBS. And I got a call out of the blue, and he offered me this role. Or he said, I recommended you for it, get your agent onto it, the producers. And they offered it to me. And it was the part of a serial killer who wears a series of appallingly bad wigs and kidnaps these prostitutes and keeps them in dioramas in the basement of his house. And I just burst out laughing when Bill told me. I mean, no one in Hollywood or anywhere would think Jim Piddock has that. His name is written all over that role. But Bill did. That was how out of the box he was, and how he could see things that other people couldn't. And he was right. It was perfect role for me, and I would never have called it. I had great fun doing it, and I had a lovely week with him, or more than a week, 10 days. And we finally got to work together and hang out for a long stretch of time. So the fact that he died so soon afterwards was really impactful for me, because it was such a shock, and it was so out of the blue. And I knew, what he was going in to have done in hospital, and it was fairly routine, and it didn't end up that way. So, he died at, I think he was 61, 62. I mean, he was really young by today's standards, and so much to offer. He had more energy than almost every 20-year-old I know. He had more energy than a room full of people, 20-year-olds together. He was just this force of nature. So to see that extinguished was quite
heartbreaking.
Yeah, it was shocking, and it was a big loss for many, many people, not least of which his wife Louise and his 2 kids.
Yeah, that was a major loss. Jim, you watched the 1980 Academy Awards alone with a bottle of cheap wine in your tiny attic apartment in Southeast London, sobbing through Dustin Hoffman's Best Actor acceptance speech. Looking back, given the amazing career you've had, what advice do you have for any despondent young actors out there who may be watching this interview right now?
Have a good cry. Don't drink a bottle of cheap wine, but have a good cry. We all need to do that. I was feeling very self-indulgent and very defeated at that point. I was out of work. I worked for a couple of years and didn't know where I was going with my career or life. And the speech was lovely, because he accepted the award on behalf of all actors everywhere toiling in obscurity, and not with the privilege or luck of being able to work. And I just found that very moving. And, in my emotionally vulnerable state, I was literally a self-pitying mess. What was the punchline to that, which I think you probably were leading to, is that 4 years later, I was presented with an award for a performance on Broadway, and in the audience was Dustin Hoffman, and I got to know him by that point in my life through a series of circumstances that the book explains, and he led a standing ovation for me when I got the award. So yeah, you never know. You just don't know what's around the corner. That's not to say don't be, to keep your dreams realistic, but if you keep them realistic like I did, you'll never know what happens. And that I would never have dreamed in a million years could happen.
Well, Jim, it was very well deserved. I want you to just listen to some of the special moments of your career. Just listen to this. You met Marcel Marceau and Quentin Crisp. You've attended the most star-studded Hollywood parties. You've worked with everyone from George C. Scott, Angela Lansbury, Tom Hanks, Anthony Hopkins, Michael Caine, to Nathan Lane and Olivia Newton-John. Tommy Tune gave you a tap dancing lesson at an audition. You were given a private performance of A World Without Love by Peter Asher of Peter and Gordon. You played ping pong with Salman Rushdie. You played football with Rod Stewart on a team of British expats called the Exiles. And you scored 25 runs in a cricket match against the legendary John Snow. Do you sometimes have to pinch yourself to believe that you've lived such an incredible life?
Yes. Yeah. Listen, I'm in a business that's sort of riddled with stars, and the book is shamelessly name dropping because I'm like Zelig. I'm in and out and popping up here and there, and I'm always in the background or in the foreground with them. Yeah, I mean, it's partly the nature of the business, but I've just been very fortunate. And my choices have sort of paid off in that respect. I to be honest with you, people say, I've often been asked, who have you been overawed by? What stars have you been overawed by? And it's very rarely stars in movies or film or even the stage. I get far more overawed by famous sports players because I can't do that. I can do the other thing. So I get it, and I know that they're good at it, and they've been lucky, and they're famous because of it. Occasionally, I mean, Michael Caine, I was slightly in awe of because I'd been such a huge fan growing up. But I, generally speaking, I'm far more sort of awestruck by professional sports players because, as I say, it's like magicians. I don't know how magic's done. I go and watch magic shows on magicians, and I'm not a massive fan of them or whatever, but I go to the Magic Castle in LA or something, and I just watch and watch, and I go, I have no idea how you did that. It's magic. I don't know how that works. Whereas I know how the other thing works. I know how it works. And when I see a superb baseball player or a soccer player or any sport, tennis player, I don't know how you get to that level. It's extraordinary to me. So that to me it strikes me dumb more than being around actors.
I have only one more question for you. Your mother used to say that you could achieve anything you want to if you put your mind to it. So Jim, looking back, have you achieved what you wanted to?
Yeah, she also said, when vulgarity begins, humor ceases. And I ignored that advice for the whole of my life. So, yeah, it was brilliant advice. My father gave me, I just have two things that I remember my parents saying to me. And I remember them very early in my life. It was like, if I'm going to pluck one thing from each of them and take it with me, this is what it is. And my father said, make sure you pick a job that you enjoy. Now, he had a million reasons to not want me to become an actor, which I'll explain in the book. Very, very emotional reasons. But he supported it because he knew it's what I wanted to do. And my mother always said, and she was often didn't want to give me praise, or a very typical British mother. Don't want my child to be big-headed, so I won't tell him he's wonderful in anything I do, or he's whatever. But she did say to me when I was very young, when you put your mind to it, you can do anything. And she meant me specifically, or that's the way it came across. I think it is actually true for anyone. I think it's great advice. When you really, really focus and put your mind to something, anything can be achieved. It's not guaranteed at all, but you almost have to do that as an actor or any vocational career. But it was great advice, and I it lived with me and still does. I mean, she passed away 5 years ago or whatever. But that's a great thing to give a child, to say, by the way, just know that you in particular, I've seen it in you. When you are single-minded, you can do anything. And that's wonderful. That's wonderful because it's quietly self-affirming without going over the top. And believe me, she did not go over the top. I would come home and say, I'm starring in this. And she'd go, oh, okay, yeah. And then, of course, she'd call all her friends afterwards and say, guess what? But to me, she never wanted to let on that she was impressed or anything, because I'd get big-headed. But by then, I knew how to cope with it.
Well, your parents did something right, because you're one of the most grounded, centered, humble, and articulate guests I've ever had. I know we'll very soon be seeing you as Captain Carradine of the Queen Mary, correct?
Yeah, that's right. There's a supernatural thriller called Queen Mary, and I play the captain of the ship, Captain Carradine, in the 1930s, which is a fun role. I get to be a good guy, a bad guy, and stuff in between. It's a very complex and interesting, fun part.
Well, I can't wait to see it. I want to tell our viewers that you can follow Jim's career and find out everything that's happening by going to his website, jimpiddock.com. Well, Jim, in your book, you shared a great piece of advice that you got from Harold Ramis. You said, You should always try to sit next to the smartest person in the room. And that's certainly what I've been doing today, sitting here with you. Thank you so much, Jim, for taking the time to appear on our show.
Thank you so much. And I just have one request for people. If you buy the book, please do for charity's sake, but just rate and review it, or just rate it at least on Amazon, because that helps drive their algorithms, and that will end up raising more money for these very, very good causes. Thank you so much for having me and giving me the time. And thank you, everybody, for watching or listening.
Our guest has been the wonderful actor, screenwriter, producer, and author, Jim Piddock. We've been discussing his fabulous new book entitled Caught with My Pants Down and Other Tales from a Life in Hollywood. My name is Harvey Brownstone. Thank you to our producer, Steve Silver. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out all the great interviews on the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when new videos are posted.